episode 268 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Lydia Creech,
Nathan Smith.
And in today's episode, we will talk about movies that we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be continuing our found footage horror series with 2007's Wreck. But first, real quickly, if you have not gone to cinematary.com, we talked, I'm sure, for people who are following the podcast or the site, heard us talk or saw stuff on social media from the Toronto International Film Festival. We have our full coverage now on cinematary.com. If you go to cinematary.com/2019 Toronto International Film Festival, you can get to the page. We have a discussion, which is like a long dialogue about the different films that Jessica, Andrew, and I caught there. And then we also have individual reviews of each films, so please, check it out. There's a lot of the stuff is starting to trickle out in the theaters, like Joker, Knives Out's going to be coming out soon.
Jojo Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit will be coming out soon, so you have some of those. But then a lot of the kind of hidden gem festival stuff. We talked about Lena from Lima and a number of other films. I would recommend checking out our reviews on the site from our TIFF coverage, because it's the beauty of the film festival. You get to catch a lot of small things that you don't really think of. So. Go there, like I said, cinematary.com/2019 Toronto International Film Festival. We got a bunch of stuff from there. You can also relive our very tired video recap diaries, where it's just us without much coffee. But let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. And Lydia, I'm going to kick off with you, because you were very dedicated in your watching habit of this. You went all the way to the library and watched it in the library viewing room, which honestly, a round of applause for the level of effort you put onto it. So tell us a little bit about Office Killer.
Right. This is another one from the Vulture's Lady Killer list. Again, not a beginner's list, because none of these are accessible. But this is by Cindy Sherman, who I understand is primarily an art photographer. But Office Killer, it stars Molly Ringwald and Carol Kane. Carol Kane, I knew her from Princess Bride. She plays Valerie, the wife of Miracle Max. And it's
not a fan of Taxi with Judd Hirsch and Danny DeVito.
This is not classic sitcometary.
I'm just,
Zach.
you're
Thank
good.
you very
Continue.
much.
derailing.
I'm
is
sorry.
what you're doing. Thank you. It's billed as like a horror comedy. Carol Kane plays Doreen, and she's just a copy editor at a failing magazine in the late 90s. And her bosses treat her terribly. Her coworkers.
It could be current day as well.
They keep. That's true. Although it's failing for a different reason. It's like plotty stuff. But her coworkers keep calling her Mousy, and she wears her hair in like two little buns on the side of her head. They look like ears. It's not good. She's a very sad character. And she just loses it one day. I don't know. You kind of get the vibe. Like, it starts and you're introduced to this character and you're like, oh, she's kind of weird. Oh, she doesn't interact well with other people. Oh, the name of this movie is Office Killer. I wonder what's going to happen. But I thought it was very enjoyable. It was kind of that very uncomfortable sort of humor, because it reminded me a little bit of Office Space and the what's the character with the stapler?
I know who. We know who you're talking about, though. The Stephen Root character.
You all know who I'm talking. Yes. And eventually snaps and like things go bad in the office, but a much more like horror bent. Like there's flickering light. Like this magazine is doing so bad that they like can't keep the lights on all the time, and they're always like flickering, which is supposed to be scary, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, that's y'all can't pay your electricity bill. That's sad. And Molly Ringwald kind of plays opposite her, and she's like, no, she's this weird girl, and nobody believes her. It's like, oh, that's just Doreen. She's fine. She's weird, but she's not bad. I don't know.
As is the case generally.
As is the case generally. But I was with it for a long time, and it gets weirdly like... I'm going to say this is an extremely well-made movie because some of these things that I've pulled off of this vulture list have been bad. Like, you know, directed by a woman, so that's great. But also they're bad. They're just like bad horror movies. This one's extremely well-made. It's got a great budget, obviously. And like special effect, it at one point veers real hard into body horror. And I was just like, about an hour into the movie, I was just like, gross, gagging. So I guess it balances the horror, sad comedy. I don't know. I think you might have to be kind of a mean person to call it an out and out comedy. But I really liked it. I'm sad that it's not available. I'm very happy I watched it. If you live in St. Louis, you should just email Washington University Library and be like, hey, I want to watch a movie. And they'll set you up real nice. But it's hard to find. I'll say that.
I mean, do you... I don't know if you did any research on it, but is it like a distribution thing, or is it just like it didn't really hit with audiences and kind of just withered away?
I don't think it really hit with audience. It's from the late 90s, and I mean, Cindy Sherman's not really a film person from what I understand.
Looking at this Wikipedia page right now, I think it bears mentioning that this movie is co-written by one Todd Haynes. And it says it's distributed by Miramax, and like just looking at it, and also the fact that it's directed by a woman, I mean, it kind of seems like the kind of thing that like
might have gotten buried.
Yeah,
by, like,
that
a
like
weird
after
Miramax
it didn't
thing.
do so well, that like Harvey Weinstein probably just like wanted to shut it away forever, as he had a tendency to do at Miramax and the Weinstein Company.
I don't know. I think it's very, since, you know, directed by a woman. I'm not going to say like feminist icon Doreen, because most of the victims that she gets to are, you know, her female bosses who are not nice to her. So it's like, okay. But I think it really gets about, I don't know, like workplace discrimination. I think Cindy Sherman and everyone's very smart, and Todd Haynes about some of the issues with office work and stuff. I mean, also it's sad and weird, like Office Space, but yeah, that would explain that.
Yeah, that's kind of a just the fact that it was with Miramax and, and Harvey Weinstein probably explains like why it got buried.
Also, one of the other co-writers on it is this director named Tom Kalin, who I only know actually because he teaches at Columbia, but he is another lesser known than Todd Haynes, but another big member of the new queer cinema movement of the 90s. He did this movie called Swoon in the early 90s that is about the Leopold and Loeb case. And most recently being 2007, he directed this movie called Savage Grace with Julianne Moore and Eddie Redmayne. So this is like, I had already wanted to see this movie, but I'm like even more intrigued now knowing some of these people involved in it.
Well, you might have to come to St. Louis.
Well, unfortunately, there's only one way to watch it.
No, I'm really liking going through this list and finding just a bunch of weird. Some of it's very bad, but there's like real hidden gems. Yeah,
that's cool though. Well, Office Killer. If you live in the St. Louis area, I don't know. There probably is like a, you know, it's Weinstein. Go find a torrent. Like just download it. Like just give him the finger. Like try to find it. But
right, yeah.
Yeah. Office Killer. Cool. Real quickly, I caught up with finally, which is kind of strange because I really enjoy the Murnau version, but I caught up with Werner Herzog's 1979 Nosferatu The Vampyre, whatever.
Yeah, just say vampire, whatever. It's got a Y in it.
Yeah, it got a Y. pretty much, you know, the Dracula tale. It doesn't really steer too much off course from that. It kind of adds this this plague element to the end of it once Dracula is like coming back to the town where Jonathan Harker lives. But I found it kind of interesting comparing it to the German Expressionist classic, because even though Herzog very much kind of like modernizes it in the terms of like just innovations in you know, camera and technology and stuff like that. It kind of still keeps those expressionist elements to it. It really has this kind of. Yeah. Oh, he's fantastic. He once he appears, once like Harker, who's played by Bruno Gantz, gets to the castle and meets Dracula, Klaus Kinski's like his face has like all of this desperation and sadness just in his eyes and in his face that it's not like better or worse. It's like just this kind of different version from the Murnau film that I think a lot. Again, it's kind of like almost in tandem in conversation with it, but not really trying to like make a better version or make a you know, like a new version. It's just like this kind of film that's in conversation with that uses kind of Herzog's sensibilities. I mean, like I was saying, it has this kind of romantic element to it, which is like pre-expressionism, and because he has these long kind of these long takes of Jonathan Harker, you know. He like spends a lot of time just on the trip from Wismar to Transylvania, where he's like in this, you know, open land,
like a lot of misty landscapes.
Lots of mist, lots of mountaintops. You just kind of have like this German Austrian countryside that he's kind of tearing through, and it kind of evokes like the kind of romantic era like landscape paintings and things like that. That a lot of, I'm sure, Murnau and people of the German Expressionist movement were probably, you know, thinking of, but didn't necessarily have the technological advancements to portray on the screen. They were using what they had. So that's what's kind of, again, why I describe it more as like in conversation with that movie than trying to redo it or remake it or whatever. It's like it's taking a lot of the soul of what Murnau was doing, and Herzog seems like interested in kind of breathing in new life with these performances that I think you mentioned Klaus Kinski, but
Mina was really Isabel, good too. Who plays her?
Yeah, Isabel Adjani, who plays Lucy. I thought she was really good as well. And then Bruno Gantz, who a lot of people, I think he's very well known in Germany, playing Jonathan Harker. I mean, he doesn't. There's not much he does in the second half because he's, you know, just kind of sitting there. But I don't know, the kind of interplay between him and Dracula. They have like the sequence where he finally appears. You know, he gets to the castle and he's like having this dinner, and it's like this weird, semi-erotic, just uncomfortable tension that, like, I don't know, it's kind of, I don't really know how to describe it, because it's not like there's like this kind of like push and pull eroticism between them, but at the same time there's like this, again, Kinski's face is so like sad and depraved and intense, that like watching him watch Jonathan Harker eat like his food and just kind of like live in the castle, which seems so dead most of the time, is like there's something just really off, and there's like no music playing. It's just kind of, I described it on my Letterboxd review as like ASMR horror, because Herzog.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, Herzog uses like you hear like the rustling of trees and the crackle of the fire. It's a very quiet movie. He occasionally will have these Wagner cues that kind of play into that, again, that romanticism, that the kind of misty landscapes. But overall, it really is like this quiet movie that like leans on just kind of those small subtle noises that kind of haunt you. But Lydia, you were gonna say something?
No, I saw it last year, and the ASMR thing is so true, because one of the thing that leapt out at me was the sound design, just like the wind and rustling. And when we get to the plaguey element at the later half of the movie. It's like, the abandoned ship that bumps up on shore kept with the rats in the plate, like the creaking of ropes and the wind through the sails. And he technologically advanced because he has the ability to add all these creeping sound effects and noises. And that's what struck me when I watched it.
Well, again, going back to the point, like it's really just enhancing the silent version, because the silent version just didn't have the capabilities to do that, and so that's what was really interesting about this, because I've always been concerned that it's going to be like they tried to completely redo it, just do this whole new thing with it, and I was really struck by how much it kind of kept the spirit of the Murnau version, but then gave it a lot of these cinematic elements that just weren't available to him in the 1920s. And so just that sound design, it's practically a silent movie for most of the time, because there's not a lot of dialogue for the most part, especially when Harker is in Transylvania and is interacting with Dracula and is like spending that extended amount of time in the castle. It's incredibly quiet. There's really not any speaking, and it becomes like a silent movie. But it's not like he's relying on the score as well. He's relying on like these very subtle noises that kind of lull you into this kind of almost ambient space. So yeah, if you like some ASMR horror, check out Nosferatu the Vampyre. It's on the Criterion Channel. So yeah, get it there. Cool. Nathan, you have a few films that you are reporting on from the New York Film Festival.
Yes. Unfortunately, I was not able to go to quite so many films at the New York Film Festival this year as I had hoped. I would have perhaps applied for press credentials, but I thought that I was still going to have a job, full-time job, during press screenings for the New York Film Festival. Turns out I got fired right before they began, so that didn't happen. But I was able to catch a couple of things. I saw the new Pedro Costa movie, which you can check out some thoughts about that in our TIFF coverage over at cinematary.com.
Yeah.
And I will admit that as much as I like Pedro Costa, I was really tired before that movie and was kind of dozing in and out.
Not the best movie to be tired for.
It's not a film festival until you fall asleep.
I mean, you really got to do that. And, everybody's falling asleep around you at film festivals. It's what they're for, So I look forward to seeing that movie fully awake next year and sharing some more coherent thoughts about it.
I'll be honest with you. I was doing the same thing through that movie.
I mean, on the one hand, he is one of those guys where it feels appropriate and it feels okay, since, the movies are kind of drifting in and out of reality and not quite reality. But I also would have liked to know a little bit more of what was going on.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyways, the two movies that I was fully coherent for that I have seen, the festival's still going on, but I don't think I'm going to be able to catch anything else in it. First one is To the Ends of the Earth, the new movie from the Japanese filmmaker Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who you might know from movies like Pulse and Cure. This movie is kind of interesting because he was not able to be there, but he recorded a little video intro that played before the movie. He also filmed the video intro in his office, I guess, and there was a DVD shelf behind him, and featured prominently right next to his head were seasons 1 and 2 of the OC, the box sets, DVD box sets, and I was quite happy to see that. Anyways, so in the intro, Kiyoshi said that basically the reason why this movie happened is because he was contacted by I guess whatever cultural ministry or whatever in Uzbekistan does things with film and film financing. But basically, Uzbekistan reached out to him and was like, hey, we want you to come here and make a movie kind of celebrating the 25th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Japan and Uzbekistan, and also to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the construction of this theater in Uzbekistan, the Nouveau Theater, which plays a really big part in the movie. And basically, as you learn in the movie, the story behind this really crazy, beautiful theater, the Nouveau Theater, is that it was constructed by Japanese POWs that were captured by the Soviets during World War II. After World War II ended, the POWs were not released and were basically just used as free labor. And even though these guys like never knew, if they were going to live, much longer, they never knew if they were going to see their families again. They didn't really know what their futures were. They still committed themselves to like putting all of their effort into this theater and to making it this crazy, beautiful, building with all of these rooms, like representing the different regions of Uzbekistan. So basically this movie is about a Japanese TV news documentary crew who are making a documentary about the culture of Uzbekistan. The journalist is a woman named Yoko, who, of course, is very confused and unfamiliar with this environment. It's totally different from everywhere that she's been, everything she knows. And she doesn't speak the language. Most people there don't speak Japanese. As she walks around, you can just like feel a kind of casual tension because everybody around her is looking at her, from just like casual glances of kind of confusion of like, this person clearly doesn't belong here, to, men being leery and weird and all that. Basically, this is kind of a travelogue of sorts, of this woman, Yoko, kind of just figuring out the environment and the landscape and the culture of Uzbekistan while sort of dealing with her own personal problems. If you're mostly familiar with Kurosawa from his horror fantasy genre work, this is going to probably completely surprise you. If you've seen any of his kind of more recent stuff, it may not come as quite a shock. But it is, it is not quite real at all times. There are moments where it sort of slips into fantasy, but those moments are very sparse and he uses them very sparingly. And, the thing about movies like Cure and Pulse, even if they're really terrifying, they do have this kind of, not quite slow cinema, but they do have this kind of contemplativeness to them, and this sort of solitude, which is used to really strong effect here. I mean, this is a really great, sort of lost in translation kind of movie about somebody who's just in a totally unfamiliar environment. And I really didn't know very much about it at all going into it. I just, knew Kiyoshi and was happy to see one of his new movies. I didn't know it was in Uzbekistan or anything like that. And it really just like took me by surprise.
Did you have to do research to put it in this historical context about Japan and Uzbekistan, or is that kind of explained within the movie?
So the stuff about this movie celebrating the 25th anniversary of diplomatic relations, I did not know. All the stuff about the Navoy Theater is explained in the movie, though.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, it is kind of, you are sort of like, why is this Japanese crew like specifically interested in coming to Uzbekistan of all places? And then, there's not really a reason, they're just sort of doing a job. But like halfway through, they sort of learn about this like historical connection between Japan and Uzbekistan. There's like one guy who is Uzbek who's helping them out, who knows Japanese and like loves Japanese culture, and he tells them, the story about the Navoy Theater. So it's just like a very, I don't know, it's a very quiet, sort of patient movie. There are a few times where it kind of gets a little on the nose metaphorically, and has some kind of obvious symbols. But I didn't really mind that too much. Mostly it was just like a very sort of gentle, pleasant, emotional experience that I was really grateful for. It's just like, it's just one of those things, like, kind of film festival things where it's just like a movie from another country that you don't really know much about, and it ends up, being like totally accessible and engaging and, leaves you with something emotionally. So I don't know if this has been picked up for distribution yet in the US, which kind of is what has been happening with his movies lately. But I really hope that it, comes out, because I think it's a movie that like you could take your parents to even, it's just like very accessible, I think, while also being pretty profound. So the other thing that I saw at the New York Film Festival, right after this movie, a very totally
Can you say the title of that other one first?
Change of pace. Yeah. So I saw the
Sorry.
Wait, do you want me to say the title of the Kiyoshi Kurosawa movie?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, To the Ends of the Earth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, no, it's okay. The next movie I saw, it was not really a new movie, but kind of a new movie. The Cotton Club Encore, which is basically the sort of director's cut of Francis Ford Coppola's The Cotton Club, which came out in 1984, I believe. And, as I'm sure you know, Coppola has, over the past couple of decades, taken to restoring and fiddling with some of his earlier movies. Most famously, there's the Apocalypse Now Redux, and then the more recent Apocalypse Now Final Cut, which just came out like a month ago. And this actually premiered.
Sorry, that was such a noise from Lydia. just like the reaction of.
Oh my gosh. That's okay. No, it's okay. But this has actually been, I think, out and about. I think it premiered at a festival in Europe. I don't remember where, or maybe Venice or something, like 2 years ago. But basically, the Cotton Club up until now has been, considered one of Coppola's minor works. Basically, the story behind it is that the movie was produced by Robert Evans, the noted producer of movies like Rosemary's Baby, Chinatown, and of course The Godfather, directed by Coppola. He and Coppola had a really difficult time working together on The Godfather, did not like each other at all. And this movie was basically Robert Evans' baby. It was going to be his directorial debut. He had invested a lot in it emotionally and otherwise. And when it came down to it, he did not feel comfortable directing, and he asked Coppola to step in. And basically, this movie was supposed to be a big deal. It was going to be, the team from The Godfather reuniting, Coppola's return to the gangster genre. But it was a big flop after Coppola had already had a couple of flops, sort of pushed him further into director jail, further into doing for-hire jobs, and has been, unless you're a Coppola auteurist, kind of forgotten until now. And it beyond just sort of like, Coppola being like unhappy with his movies or, wanting to restore them, I think there's a really, really good reason to revisit this movie. Basically, if you don't know the Cotton Club, the real Cotton Club, it was a super famous nightclub in Harlem in the 20s and 30s. Yeah, all of the like jazz greats of that era, Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, all of those people. But the thing about it was, of course, being the time, it was not open to anyone who wasn't white. But all of the performers and everyone in the orchestra was black. There was never a white person who performed there. Yeah, no, never. So you have this just like incredibly, rigid division. And it's sort of, I think that's, I don't know, it's always been kind of a weird thing because you're like, this movie is about Harlem, it's about jazz. Surely it should not really be about white people. Unfortunately, the original cut basically is like only about white people. Because it has this sort of woven into the story of the Cotton Club nightclub is this story with Richard Gere and Diane Lane that's supposed to be a gangster movie, kind of an homage to The Public Enemy and Scarface and all of those classic pre-code mob movies. But, it's kind of weird because Richard Gere didn't actually want to play a gangster. He like refused to play a gangster, even though he was cast in a gangster movie. And so he like persuaded, Coppola to kind of give the movie more of a musical direction. And Richard Gere actually plays the cornet. So he plays his own like trumpet solos in this movie. But
does he play someone who performs at the Cotton Club? Wait, what?
Well, so that's the thing is that they had to like find a way to make a white person perform at the Cotton Club. To center a
white person?
Yeah, like because Richard Gere didn't want to play a gangster, so they had to, kind of create a way for him to perform. And so, Coppola, that was not the movie that Coppola originally intended. It was kind of the movie was about the sort of division of the Cotton Club, the racial division and the segregation, and had, a white story and a black story, but it was sort of about that separation of those two worlds. But when he turned in the final cut, the studio was like, there's too much music, too much tap dancing, too much jazz, too many black people. You got to cut some of that out. So, a lot of the really beautiful stuff was completely junked. Musical sequences cut to the floor. The original movie is kind of notorious for being a little bit of a mess and being one of those movies that's like not that long, but feels longer than it is. So basically the goal with this movie was not only to like restore footage, but to add in all these storylines, all these musical sequences that have been cut, which largely focus on the movie's black characters. I think there's about half an hour of added footage and like 15 minutes of removed footage. So it's a very different movie, and gives, the opening is different than the original film. The opening of this movie, you get an establishing shot of the Cotton Club, and you hear some lines of dialogue that you don't hear in the original cut. Basically, you hear the doorman of the Cotton Club. This couple walks up, and the doorman looks at the man. He's like, "You're white, you can go in." But he sees the woman that the guy is with, and he's like, "I think you're black. You're light skinned, but." You're not welcome here. So it immediately sort of sets, the movie into its proper context and kind of frames it in this, kind of division, and makes race like the center point of the movie more than it is in the original. And so you have, Richard Gere plays this guy, Dixie Dwyer, this jazz musician who falls in with the Irish mob sort of against his best wishes. He becomes this sort of like assistant to this gang kingpin named the Dutchman. And the Dutchman basically hires Dixie to hang out with his mistress, who's played by Diane Lane. And of course, as these things go, Diane Lane and Richard Gere fall in love with each other because Richard Gere is much more attractive than the mobster that Diane Lane goes around with. So all kinds of hijinks and shenanigans ensue, and Dixie goes off to Los Angeles and becomes a big-time movie star in movies like Scarface, that kind of thing. But there's a whole other half of the movie that is much less of the focus in the original movie, and centers around a character played by the amazing Gregory Hines, tap dancer, but also an actor in movies like A Rage in Harlem, Running Scared. And this was like one of his first really big movies. He is becomes a dancer at the Cotton Club. He falls in love with a woman played by Lynette McKee, who's a talented singer. And she is mixed and passes for white and is able to reach a level of success that Gregory Hines is not. So you have all of this really kind of rich racial, subtext that is added back in. You have some this is basically a musical. You have these fucking amazing tap dancing routines, musical numbers. There are Fats Waller songs, and
do you know who did the choreography?
That is a very good question. I do not know off the top of my head who did the choreography, but I know that the choreography was based off of routines that they did at the Cotton Club. So it's all taken from stuff that, actual performances, actual numbers. They were tried really hard to make the set of the Cotton Club as authentic as possible as well. And there's this amazing sequence that sort of recalls the christening baptism montage in The Godfather, where all the guys are getting mowed down while Michael's daughter is getting baptized. There's a sort of equivalent sequence in this where Gregory Hines is doing this tap dancing number while all of the big mob bosses are getting taken down. And it's I don't know if to call it like double exposure or what, but like the sequences are like overlaid. And so you see him tap dancing while all of this violence is happening. And it's just like really beautiful. It was an amazing movie to see in a theater, just because it is literally basically a musical. I mean, Coppola made this right after One from the Heart, which I think is like one of his best movies and is a fucking incredible musical. And he always has a like real musical sensibility that I think really shines here in this new cut. You have a lot of great sort of like supporting roles from people like Lawrence Fishburne and Tom Waits. Bob Hoskins is really amazing in it. A young Nicolas Cage is in it. Jennifer Grey, all of these, 80s actors show up in it. It's just like a director's cut that I think really needed to happen, because it's not only bringing this movie up to its kind of full visual glory. It's like a really important, I think doing a kind of justice that was not done to, the movie's original performers and the people that it's about. It's going to get us. What's that? Oh, no, it's okay. It's like a movie that is, worth, at least in its original version, I think worth being, having hesitancies about, because it fucking sucks. It's just like a classic story of like everything Hollywood does wrong. Yeah, exactly. And also there's just like a lot of amazing behind the scenes shit that was going down. Like, this is a gangster movie that was funded by gangsters. And there was a lot of part of the reason why Evans stepped out, and part of the reason why they just had a difficult time getting this movie made in general, was because there were shady people involved, and there were heavies on the set, and it was just an uncomfortable experience for all involved. So part of what was really cool about seeing this was the fact that Coppola did a little Q&A afterwards, and I thought it was really kind of moving, actually. He said, he was like, I think my family will probably kill me for saying this, because he made our lives difficult in a lot of ways, but I would like to dedicate, this movie and this screening to Robert Evans, which is like, if Coppola and Evans can make up, then there is hope for the rest of us. So it was, I don't know, it's just like, as much as I love George Lucas, you can definitely say that there's a sort of cash grabbiness to his kind of special editions. But I feel like Coppola really, like, I don't know, like he's really doing something, I think, with revisiting his movies in this way. And I think this is really special. And it's going to get a like small theatrical rollout in some theaters across the country. I was going to ask if this cut was available. Yeah, it's Lionsgate is doing, a small release in bigger metropolitan areas, and then I'm sure like within a year it will probably be on Blu-ray. It's definitely worth checking out. I think I had a lot of fun with it.
Interesting. So hopefully it'll get since it's kind of getting this revisiting, that it'll be more widely available. Maybe some places will be able to pick it up so people can see it, like whether it's streaming or somewhere else. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back talking Rec after this.
Hey, Cinematariats. This is your co-host Lydia Creech with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we definitely want your money. We still want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema, but now we're getting into the Patreon game, baby. We've brought on a lot of new voices to contribute to the site, and we want to honor our responsibility to compensate all these smart people for their hard work. To help us out, head over to patreon.com/cinematary to sign up at the $5 a month level. In exchange, our patrons will get an exclusive bonus episode every month, weekly shoutouts on each episode of the show, and the ability to dictate a movie for us to cover eventually. If money's tight, we get it. There are still a few things you can do that we would greatly appreciate. First, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. That's free to help us reach more listeners. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to Zach@cinematary.com. That's Zach, Z-A-C-H, to let us know your thoughts, and we will read them out and respond to them on future episodes. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we put out every week. So, to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, share with your friends and family, and sign up to be a patron. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show.
And we are back with part 2 of episode 268 of Cinematary. In this part, we will continue our not young critics. Blech. It's been that kind of day, guys.
It's October.
It's that kind of day. Our found footage horror series with 2007's Wreck. It's directed by Juan Balaguero and Paco Plaza, from a script by Luis A. Verdejo, as well as the two directors worked on the script as well. The film follows a late-night TV host named Angela and her cameraman, Pablo, who are following the fire service on a call to an apartment building, but then the Spanish police seal off the building after an old woman is infected by a virus, which gives her inhuman strength. The movie spawned 3 sequels, with the last one, Wreck 4 Apocalypse, coming out in 2014. On the inspiration for the series, in 2008, the directors were at the Glasgow Film Festival, and they said, our main reference was TV, was not other films or a tradition of previous features. I think the main influence for us was watching television. What we wanted was to build a classic horror story, but telling it in a way of a TV show. In 2010, talking about the sequel to the LA Times, he said, we began to talk about how we could make it a very effective, cheap, hypothetically successful horror movie, and we both fell in love with this concept. Some of the considered titles was Origin, 70 Minutos, which I kind of like 70 Minutos, honestly.
Like 60 minutes.
Yeah, I like 70 Minutos, and Duración 70 Minutos.
Okay. I like that 70-minute thing.
An alternate... Yeah, I like that. An alternate ending was shot in which Angela attempts to silently go down the staircase with the infrared until she is finally devoured by the infected. And it was shot, but then left out because they thought it was too brutal.
Wow.
That was like among the other things in the movie, but okay. In 2008, the BBC said, Wreck will definitely jangle the nerves. Or if you're in the BBC, Wreck will definitely jangle the nerves.
Oh my God, Zach.
But it's a movie that's unlikely to last in the memory. In 2007, Variety said, lazily scripted without even a pretense of character development or psychological depth, it offers nothing new for genre fans and no reason for mainstream audiences to bite. And then in 2008, Time Out said, a brilliantly staged early scare signals that the safety rails are off, and despite an unexpected last-minute swerve into the supernatural realm, the edge of the seat tension is sustained to the very last second. So, let's talk a little bit about Wreck. I was thinking about while watching this that it seems like we're gradually kind of evolving the found footage genre from the first 2 movies, because while watching Wreck, naturally it kind of has that correlation to Ghostwatch just because it's like the television show setup, but this seems much more and last week we talked a little bit about how Noroi was like was similar to like, or at least in conversation with Blair Witch Project, and this one seems much more in line with what would come from our next week movie, Paranormal Activity, as well as just kind of the horror trend of the late early aughts, this kind of 2000 to 2010 era, where Wreck seems very much beholden to that kind of horror, those kind of horror movies. But at the same time, I thought that this one was like adding that caveat of having the found footage element, made it a little bit more interesting than a lot of those movies that I think that people kind of classify as being easily forgettable. I think that this one has, especially compared to, I know we had a long discussion last week with Noroi, that there was like haunting kind of like shocking images, but there wasn't necessarily any like genuine scares. And I think this one actually delivers with like a lot of scares, as well as like really like surreal, haunting images. But what did you all make of Wreck?
I think this one actually does have kind of an iconic imagery, because I knew the final shot before this is the first time I've seen it, but I was aware of what the final image is of the female reporter like crawling on the floor and then getting dragged backwards. Spoilers.
Yeah. It's been out for 12 years.
Yeah. The other thing I thought about, kind of considering the development of found footage as a genre, like this one doesn't have a frame story at all. The way the footage is presented, it's just like unedited raw camera footage, because you know when they knock the camera around, the cut, it's like all sequential, right? So Noroi would do the thing of cut back and forth and insert shots. The BBC thing is like live television, and this one doesn't have any explanation, kind of like Blair Witch, of like where they got the footage. And as far as you, the audience, are aware, you're supposed to take it as like, just this is everything they filmed. And anything that got cut out is when Pablo turned the camera off or it went funny. So, and I think Paranormal Activity is the same way. It's been a minute since I've seen it.
Paranormal Activity at least has the like opening kind of frame text of like, you know, this like Paramount Pictures, you know, this footage came from some, I don't know, I can't remember. I just watched that movie like a week ago and I already forgot what the opening text says, but it does at least give like, you know, a little bit of sort of context, which this doesn't at all, which is weird, but I also like that because
are you saying there's no context like in terms of why they're filming or
no,
why
not that, but just like how the footage,
of like where the footage came from.
Like,
there's not this like meta textual idea of like, oh, we found this mysterious camera in an abandoned
like,
building,
you know,
with dead
Cloverfield
bodies.
ends with like somebody picking the camera up or something like that. And so, you know, we know why they're there, but we have no idea how the footage got to us, which on the one hand, like, you know, that seems to be like one of the fundamental problems with this subgenre, right? Is like, obviously that's the question that anybody's going to have. But I also, surprisingly, watching this movie, I like didn't really ask myself that question.
No, this movie was great.
And it almost seems like maybe if you like don't even go near explaining that, people won't wonder so much. Like, just by sort of trying to address that.
Don't ask the question and then the audience won't ask it.
Exactly. Like, you make it a problem by trying to resolve the problem of how did the footage get to us. And like,
not that this doesn't have some problems, but
and I actually didn't even really think about it until you just said, Lydia, that this was like not really, at least not supposed to be like edited at all. This is kind of just all the footage in order as it happened, which I don't really, at least of the found footage that I have seen, can't really think of another film that is exactly like that has no editing, or air quotes, no editing, in that kind of way.
Because it's all supposed to be raw footage for this TV show that apparently never gets produced, but that's not given to us in the text of the film.
Well, it's kind of an interesting, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's like an interesting play from when we talked about Ghostwatch, which kind of has like a very strict structure of like, it's this live television broadcast of this paranormal thing, while this one is more like initially they're literally just kind of watching this fire station and doing like a on the spot kind of thing with them, and then it kind of takes this
while you were sleeping.
Yeah, I like that. While you were asleep.
Who's gonna watch it?
I like that.
I love that part when the fireman is like, this is who's gonna watch
who
it.
is this for?
Yeah.
But I think I kind of like that it was like this that it was just like this random episode of this you know, late night television show that they were filming that then kind of just went completely you know, totally off the rails awry, just because I think it like allows for like it makes it adds a little like a heightened amount of fear, to the scares happening, because there's just like this absurd spontaneity that starts taking place. Like whenever they actually get to the apartment building and they find the woman, and then she bites the police officer and stuff just starts to derate. Like once that happens, it's like it really kind of just shakes you, because I mean, you know, it's a horror movie, you know, it's a movie, it's not like it's. Yeah, you know things are going to go bad, but like the just kind of very
things are going to go bad.
The first portion of the movie where they're just doing kind of the TV show, flowing into just this kind of regular call from the to the fire department, that just like once that happens, where it like was an actionable thing, there was something like kind of jarring about that, and that kind of I think sets off a lot of the scares for the movie.
Yeah, I think the pacing in this was excellent, because they don't spend too much time like wasting time and saying like, oh, we hope we capture something good at the fire station, but it's mostly boring so far. But like the first scare that really got me was not the old woman biting someone, but the body of the second firefighter.
Yeah.
Just like hitting the fucking floor. And I was like, oh no, we're not wasting any time. I wish that I had seen this before we did our like little 80 minutes or less canon list, because it packs it in there.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to the point that Lydia, that we made last week about just the whole like 90 minutes or less seems like the perfect amount of time for this genre. I was thinking about that conversation that we had last week while watching this, because it felt like the perfect amount of time that it was able to pack in all the information that you need while also like being effective.
Yeah, I think that with something like the Blair Witch Project, I sort of, not because of the length per se, but I feel like it's maybe kind of related, where I just sort of like start wondering, like, they've been outside for all these days, like how are the cameras still charged, et cetera, et cetera. But this is like the movie itself is so tight and so quick, and also is set in this like, not that long span of time, just I guess a couple of hours really. You don't really waste any of your kind of mental energy on the like, questioning the reality of this situation at all. It's just like totally everything from kind of every angle. I wasn't really considering like the plausibility of any of this, because it just feels like, a kind of genuine thing. And I think it succeeds by by opening in such a like mundane kind of normal context, where like, even though going in, this is a horror movie, the journalists aren't like looking for something scary. It's not like some kind of ghost hunting thing like Ghost Watch or something like that. It's just like, it just totally in a second like goes from 0 to 100, and just like totally upends your comfort. And I actually saw last year the scene. I had not seen this before fully, but like Lydia, I knew the final shot, and I had seen last year in a class when it starts, the scene where it starts to go to shit and the woman rips part of the dude's throat off. And that, for whatever reason, like there are not, I feel like at this point, tons of things that in horror movies that like really fuck me up. But for some reason, the just woman ripping that dude's neck, like it's fucking nasty.
It's nasty. Like a thread of blood and flesh and viscera, like you see it travel from the neck to the mouth, and you're like,
like it just really succeeds at integrating that with the sort of the milieu of videotape, and
it's like we weren't
footage.
Expecting anything weird to happen tonight,
and then the most fucked up shit happens.
Well, I think it goes back to the conversation that we had with Ghost Watch, where it's like what's crazy about it is that it's not like it's kind of going into the whole build of the found footage movie, where they're relying on the technology that they have. So he has just like this regular TV camera, which they're nice, but it's not like some 4K top of the line thing. And so there's very much like what they had in Ghostwatch, where stuff starts happening and like there's like this reliance on technology, just the kind of apparatus of Pablo's camera within like everything that's happening. It's kind of like, I don't know, it feels like this appendage to like everything that's happening, that like you know, it's weird how that kind of takes over as the film goes on.
I mean, the camera's the mediating factor, right? Because like the last 10 or 15 minutes, the characters can't fucking see anything. The only way that they can see is using the infrared,
the night vision
function on the camera. So a lot of the drama comes from the character like who is not behind the camera being like, I can't see, there's something in the room with me, I have to be quiet but I can't be quiet, and the camera is picking all of this up. But as far as, which is the point of view, but the subject is like, I don't know, can't see.
Yeah, like, you know, people like you were saying, Zach, and stuff I read on Letterboxd and elsewhere, you know, it seems like a lot of people's issue with this movie is the lack of characterization. But honestly, when I feel like that too much characterization is sometimes the issue with found footage movies.
And I kind of push back on that because I feel like a lot, like you get enough of each character for what you need. Like, again, like we've talked about, it's not a long movie. Like adding 20 minutes to this would have ruined it if you're going to spend 20 minutes like finding out that that Angela and Pablo actually had a fling and we're like going to have to rekindle some love. You know, like that doesn't add anything to the story. The story is what's happening, you know, on screen.
It almost ruins itself by like diving into the mythology thing, because I was thinking about all of I brought it up maybe last week or the week before, like what kind of genres can you do with found footage? And for most of this movie, it's like a Contagion zombie movie, and then like right at the end, they inject some like weird shit about demons in the church, and you're like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, but real quick, I have stuff to say about that, but I really like. No, totally okay, because they're related points. You know, the like how much information, you know, is really kind of the question, I think, overall of found footage sometimes. I like that Pablo is, you know, like just the camera, you know, because I feel like in Blair Witch or Cloverfield, you just have like too much fucking mouthing off behind the camera and people saying stuff who are off screen and all this complaining. And also, you know, like,
you don't like Angela the shot of Heather's nose, like dripping snot?
I mean, you know, that works on its own level. But like Angela, you know, she's just a TV anchor. Like if you, I don't know, just the context that this movie is in, it's like, this is a person who is going here to just film this little thing, get out, go home, just doing this job. They hope
something exciting happens, and then something exciting happens, and it fucking sucks.
Yeah, it just wouldn't make sense, I feel like, for there to be a lot of characterizing in this movie. And you do get, you know, little indications of who these people are. I mean, I think the Chinese family is kind of interesting. Their dynamic, the old
couple.
Right, like they're, you know, and like you hear, you know, these people saying these like kind of casually racist things about that family. And so you do get this like kind of indication of like the relationships that everybody in this building has with each other. It's not really in depth, but you do get a sense of what this community is like. So back to the point about the ending, I feel like I kind of agree where like, you know, the image of whatever body that is at the end is really freaky, but it did kind of bug me when it sort of wanted to mythologize itself right at the end, which felt like just such an obvious ploy for making a larger franchise.
3 sequels.
Yeah, which the third sequel just totally, the second sequel, but third movie ditches the found footage gimmick apparently. And you look at the cover for it and it's like this woman holding a chainsaw and it looks like some like Resident Evil type stuff. And it just seems like such a different vibe. And part of what I really liked about this movie is how this like zombie thing kind of unexpectedly unfolded from the found footage framework. And the mythology just feels kind of like shoved in at the last minute.
Yeah. And one last, just real quickly, I want to add to your point about, about Pablo as like the camera as a character. I think that when because I think he maybe puts the camera down like one time between the start of the movie and like the final sequence where they're in that up in that room, that's the locked room that they finally get to. And so I felt like whenever they get there and they're struggling with the light and he has to like put away the camera, I think that adds this like heightened sense to the fear, because you like this has been this apparatus that you've kind of trusted that he's constantly going to be, and I think that kind of because then you're really like going, well, what's in this room? Like you lose that safety net that you've kind of had. You've had this like, invulnerability just because that Pablo in this camera can't go away. Like he's going to be fine unless he puts it down. And it's like this kind of weird, I that's just kind of how I was reacting to that final sequence, where once he put that down and they started to kind of explore the room and leave the camera in one place, then it was kind of like they just left you.
It's like, the movie's going to end.
Yeah, well, they just left you and they're completely vulnerable to whatever's going to happen.
Yeah, I think part of the thing about like Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity is that they really try to turn the people filming this into this like psychological thing, because like obviously, those movies aren't in this like news journalism context. So they have to come up with a reason for why the characters are filming. And it ends up being like, oh, these people can't really deal with reality, so they have to mediate it through this camera.
And it's like this narcissistic thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas here it's like, no, the camera is this literal tool for survival. Like if the camera is the only way to see, the only way to get light, when the light gets busted, the night vision, Pablo has to keep looking through the camera because Angela cannot see it all. So I really liked that aspect of it.
And they kind of bring that up too, because one of the reasons for keep filming, because the other problem with found footage is like, okay, why the fuck don't you turn the camera off and just focus on surviving? But it's like, no, you have to tell the truth. Like weird shit is happening with the government. Weird shit's happening with this building. The police are not telling us anything. Film. You have to tell the truth. And so as long as the camera is running, like things are okay.
I mean,
that's not true, but
well, it's like it kind of modernizes it, because even though this is 2007, it's not crazily long ago. I feel like the age of 2007 and kind of wanting to document stuff and keep.
Well, you turn on the camera when you're talking to the police.
Exactly. Like the sequences really didn't faze me, but after, you just saying that right now kind of makes me think of like the sequences where they're like confronting the government official who has like the exosuit on it, and they're going, what the hell is going on? And they like have the camera running, and then you have the one like police official who's like constantly trying to get the camera out. It feels very like current, where whenever you're like coming up to brushing up against authority and questioning what's happening, you have that apparatus of the camera in order to document whatever's going to happen, whether it's good, something good is going to happen or bad is going to happen. And that felt like that this movie was a little bit in dialogue with something very current, and that kind of subtext of like the kind of shady government plot. I felt like they handled that without going too overboard with it. They didn't over-explain it to make it seem like it was something that was completely, I don't know. Like I think it was the right amount of like government conspiracy. Kind of looking at we're going to talk about it next week, and we probably can get into discussions about it with Paranormal Activity, but I'm curious, this one, at least for me, I found to be much more effective than a lot of these kind of 2000 to 2010 kind of horror movies where regardless of how you feel about those and kind of the 2010 to current age horror movies, which I feel like kind of lean more into the as they call the elevated horror and that kind of trend. This one feels very like, and this, I'm saying this in the nice way, but kind of like a little bit of a like trash horror, like it's kind of like trash movie, garbage, like kind of B movie. Like it's not, they're not really trying to aim for like this higher, this higher purpose in there.
It's a cash grab.
I mean, exactly. The director said that like their influence was TV, not even movies, and like they wanted to make it like a TV show kind of, and I feel like, just the was sort of almost the like disposability of this movie. I don't mean that in a bad way, but that I like ideally this wouldn't be a franchise. It would just be this like one and done kind of tossed away thing. And like that is, now feels like a little bit more TV is like that than movies are now. So I feel like in some way it sort of succeeds by being televisual.
Well, yeah, it's like it has this kind of like bargain bin quality to it.
Yeah.
That isn't, but at the same time is kind of endearing about it.
I went and looked up the budget, and like, who knows? The budget for films is extremely hard to determine. But according to Google, the budget for Rec was about $2 million, and the budget for Paranormal Activity and Blair Witch Project are hovering around the tens of thousands. So there is this idea of like produce it super cheap and get a huge return on your investment that I don't know if it got.
Well, to that point, I mean, that's kind of a precursor to what a lot of horror is now with like, because is Paranormal Activity Blumhouse?
Yeah, I mean, not
am I thinking
originally, but Bloom was the one who like picked it up.
He's a producer, so
yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of like this precursor to. I mean, that's pretty much the case with a lot of horror movies now. Even like Get Out and stuff and things like that, where the budget is kind of lower because they're looking for this high return. But at the same time, like there is like with a lot of the movies that they're making, the horror movies that they're making today that are like, oh, it's not a big budget, but we're looking for a high return. There's still like this degree of quality that seems like they're trying to achieve like an A quality. Yeah.
Well, they're like put auteurs on it.
Well, it seems like they're trying to make like a high quality horror movie, even if they're doing it on a low budget. And this one feels like it's a lower budget, and it also wants to kind of have that quality, like we're talking about, to it. And again, I think that's something that's effective and really interesting, because I think a lot of the scares and the effectiveness of the scares, like I don't think you're expecting a movie that doesn't feel like it's supposed to be better. It kind of throws you off with how effective and good this movie is, because you think it's not supposed to be good.
I am kind of intrigued to watch the second movie, because it looks like it
takes place right after this one.
Yeah, it like kind of shows the like outside perspective. And like
is it also a found footage?
Yeah, that one's found footage, and like the father of the girl who was like going,
they keep talking about
who was going to get medicine is like a character in the second one. So
what is it, like this like extended universe sort of idea? Like, oh, it's happening at the same time, concurrent?
Yeah,
that's
like
what it seems like.
What I was reading was like, yeah, it's capturing like the outside effect while the events of the first movie is happening. And then there's also like a plot where these teenagers sneak in through that underground passageway that the one guy mentions, late in the film, and are able to get into the apartment building and like start, they come in contact with everything happening inside. So it's like, it's very much the sequel is very much in dialogue with this one.
I think it's something about this movie maybe that, like, I don't know, made it extra special for me was just like, I don't know, watching a Spanish horror movie. Like, I just feel like, that's so outside of where we generally think to look nationally for horror movies.
Well, it got remade like almost immediately. Yeah. I think the remake is called Quarantine, and it came out like 2008.
Yeah, it's crazy because like the movies, like that Quarantine did not do that much better than Rec at the box office, and also cost $10 million more. But it's just like, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I was complaining about the mythology stuff, but on the other hand, I was also like, maybe there's like a little bit more resonance, just because like all the, I don't know, it's just like all this Catholic shit, and it's in Spain. And so I was kind of like interested in that stuff a little bit from that angle. I don't know, it's just like neat to see this just like a down and dirty, like very accessible horror movie from somewhere where I just like don't think to look for horror.
Well, it seems kind of like the turned towards Catholicism and the Catholic stuff and the demon, like they were hoping to get picked up.
Yeah, it does feel like that.
As a sequel or a franchise.
It really does.
Which I did not appreciate. But that doesn't diminish the kind of emotional impact of just the film as itself.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty clever movie. I don't know. I did not realize it was a zombie movie at all, and it's just, I don't know. It's just I just don't really, I don't know. Every other found footage movie, so many of them, they just stick to the supernatural and the ghost
possession thing.
Yeah. And I think that when we're talking about Ghost Watch, we talked about this some, about how video and digital, there is a sort of ghostly effect to them, and that makes sense. But it really just surprised me how this movie went for something totally different, and that just came so organically and naturally out of the format in a way I was not anticipating.
There's something about the formal tendencies of found footage. It's at least the 3 that we've watched so far, and I'll be curious to see with Paranormal Activity, which I feel like outside of Blair Witch is kind of the most mainstream of the found footage genre, and then with Unfriended, which kind of reconfigures that for digital technology, streaming age. I think that'll be I love the thing I really like about this genre of horror is that, and this is I think the case for any movie genre, and especially with horror, but just kind of the genre filmmaking of taking these conceits and kind of weaving it into the story. I think that, again, you do that in most other genres. You kind of, if whatever it is, you take the conceits of that genre and construct the narrative. But there's something about kind of weaving the differing technologies, especially with movies, which are so reliant on, you have this kind of film versus digital, and then the many ways that you can record something. I mean, we'll probably talk a little bit. I mean, they had it in Ghost Watch, but we'll talk in Paranormal Activity about how you also have the nanny cam type and baby monitor cameras as well. I think that while this kind of takes the conceits of the genre and works it into the narrative, it's also interesting that found footage utilizes all of these different technologies, which movies are able to do, and utilizes that for the scares as well as just kind of constructing this world, because for the most part all 3 of these movies kind of take place in very small spaces. I mean, even Noroi, it's not like it's very expansive. It's only a couple places that they go to, but they construct these small spaces to feel like they're much bigger than they are.
Well, it's just the immediate time and space where it's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I will say it got me a couple of good times with jump scares, especially in the last bit where they go up in the attic. I was like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're mad about jump scares in horror films, probably not for you, but it does a good job, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's again, it's it does a good job with them. Yeah, like you said, the firefighter falling down the stairs and hitting that floor was like, oh god, that gets
it's nasty and sudden.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really like this one.
I think it's I didn't even really think so much about them as jump scares, because it just makes sense within the world of the movie, that
yeah,
with the premise that shit is gonna pop out and they're not gonna know how to capture it with the camera. I think it's because jump cuts, for better or worse, are an essential part of horror movie language, but this just integrates
sometimes
them.
I forgot, and it got me.
Yeah, it just,
because the problem is you forget that you're watching it, and then it's effective in that manner.
Yeah, it's just a lot about this movie. A lot of the structure and the form just feels so woven together so nicely into this little package.
Yeah, which no, I agree. Well, cool. Yeah, so Rec It is not streaming anywhere, but available at the library places and such. I can send you a copy of it if you would like. I don't know.
Send them Ghost Watch too.
Yeah, if you'd like to watch Ghost Watch, I can help you out with that as well. We'll open up the Cinematary found footage streaming service.
That should be like the Patreon exclusive, like the $10
just
tier.
The file of Ghost Watch.
We will just send you some movies.
I feel like you would like that, Nate. Like you just if we had Nathan's picks and you just had to download something and then send it to people.
11
like that'd be
people
kind of
for
fun.
$5 a month.
Honestly, I would fucking love that. And like honestly, maybe this could be a serious idea. I don't know.
Also, Nathan sent me things.
Yeah.
Like we are joking, but honestly, that does sound like a good idea.
And I mean, as long as we never say what the movies are, how can they know? I don't know.
And you know what? Whatever.
Yeah, it's 2019. We have bigger fish to fry than copyright law. So,
honestly, I kind of like that idea.
We're
going to workshop it. We'll talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
But, if you would like to learn more about Cinematary and not our pirating habits, you can go to Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary. We post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Also, if you would like to join the Patreon page, we mentioned we got a new Film Theory and Chill is up. We're gonna have a spooky one this coming up month, and hopefully some other cool stuff on the Patreon page. But thank you so much to Cam, Chad Newsom, Christopher Metcalf, Eric Dukowski, Graham Jones, Harry Eskin, Maggie, Marie Barty, Matthew Lingo, Miranda Barnwall, Ron Hayes, Tyler Chandler, Whitney Rio Ross, and Will Carroll. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, as we mentioned, we're going to be talking about 2007's Paranormal Activity as we kind of get to our end stretch of the found footage horror movies. But yeah, please, again, go check out cinematary.com. We got our TIFF coverage if you'd like to learn all the good stuff. We also got reviews of Joker, Hustlers, Ad Astra, It Chapter 2, all the good stuff there.
Nashville Film coverage is covering. Nashville Film Festival coverage is coming.
Yeah, we got that. We got the Nashville Film Festival.
Said that weird. Sorry.
Andrew's there now. He won't reveal what he feels about Hidden Life for whatever reason. I'm gonna call him out.
Wow.
I'm gonna call him out. I'm gonna call him out.
Some hidden thoughts on Hidden Life.
He doesn't want to share his feelings on Terry
Close
Malick.
to the chest.
Yeah, he's keeping it close. So
Dang.
you're gonna go to.
He had some probably like religious ass experience, and either his faith has been completely shaken, or he is like a super true believer now in Jesus
All
Christ.
I gotta say is cinemadairy.com. Check it out. He will reveal what he feels like about Terry Malick's Hidden Life in his review.
Terry
Malick's. All right, I'm ending this.
He's a patron. We can call him Terry.
I'm ending it. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you for listening.